grade 12 economics. Good afternoon. I'm Mr. Mhlongo. I'm back with you today on economics, and today's lesson is based on contemporary economic issues. Remember that this content will be a part of your upcoming examination under paper 2. In paper 2, you will come across this content in section A, section B, and section C. In section B, this content will be in question 3, will be in question 4 as a part of it, as well as question number 6 as an essay. So please join me. Let's see what we have for you in this package. Kindly be informed that this package consists of revision based on the 3 topics under economic issues, namely inflation, tourism, and environmental sustainability. There will be section A questions, section B, and section C questions being dealt with here from lower order to the higher order. So the following are the lesson objectives that will be achieved after this lesson. So, like I've said, it's a revision session which shows question paper structure. So in this case, we indicate to you how the question paper layout will be in your upcoming examination. Then it also trains you as a candidate or a learner on how to approach sections of the question paper from section A to section C. And then also brings forward some examples of questions from lower order to higher order. Most of these questions are cited from previous question papers. So it is believed that you have been taught all of these topics. Hence, we call this a revision session. The following is the question paper structure. Classification of topics for the grade 12 economics question paper. So we have economics grade 12, and then in paper 1, this is the site. But the main focus here is on paper 2 because we are revising paper 2. So we go straight to the last topic, which is contemporary economic issues. We have inflation, like I've mentioned, tourism, as well as environmental sustainability. But still remember that in paper 2, we also have the market, which is microeconomics, where we come across perfect markets, imperfect markets, as well as the market failures. So that simply tells you that in your paper 2, you have 6 topics, namely perfect market, imperfect market failures. That is your microeconomics. That can be found in question 1, question 2, as a part of question 4, as well as question 5. And then, like I've said, also economic issues. We have inflation, tourism, as well as environmental sustainability. These are found in question 1, question 3, and as a part of question 4, as well as question 6. The other part is your macroeconomics, which is your paper 1. So in this case, we come across the circular flow, business cycles, public sector, as well as the foreign exchange market. This is your macro that can be found in your paper 1. Under paper 1, this will be found in section A, which is question 1, section B, question 2, question 4 as a part of question 4, as well as the question 5, which is our section C. And then another part will be economic pursuits in your paper 1. These are topics, the protectionism and free trade, economic growth and development, industrial development policies, as well as social and economic indicators. So these are the topics that will be found in your paper 1. So avoid making mistakes as you prepare for your upcoming preparatory examination. If you will be writing paper 1, prepare accordingly. Do not mix topics, because I believe every one of you does have the question paper structure and also examination guideline given by your subject educator. So this section simply explains how to score marks in section A. What should we do to get more marks? Remember, section A is a very important section that we normally ignore because we go there and guess answers and choose wrong answers. Remember, it worth 30 marks. So if you can ensure that you cement and acquire that 30 marks, it will always be easy for you to go above 45 over 150, which is our minimum mark that we should get to get level 2. So if you can ensure that you give a respect and you honor section A, it will always be easy for you to get marks beyond even 75 over 150. So under multiple choice, you need to read the statement with understanding and have an answer in your mind. After that, look for the answer within the given 4 options. Do not just guess the answer. Ensure that you read the statement with understanding. Then provoke your mind to bring you an answer based on the understanding of your statement. After that, you can look for that answer if it's there. If it's there, then the answer is correct. But if you simply guess, you will end up guessing even wrong answers. So avoid guessing. Read statements with understanding, analyze them, link them, and then choose the correct answer. Be precise when choosing an answer, because between given options, one answer is correct and one is close, and then also others are wrong. So in this section, you can come across 2 answers that are very much related, and they are in the context of the statement, but one answer will be correct and then the rest will be wrong. So you must ensure that as you choose the answer, you are precise. Do not just choose. Ensure that you pick the correct answer to score that 2 marks. Do not guess an answer. Contextualize, classify, giving options to the statement. Avoid guessing, like I've mentioned. Avoid guessing. Ensure that you contextualize and classify the given options to the statement, and then you choose the answer that is correct. Do not leave anything unattended. Provide all answers. I know sometimes you find that you have forgotten, or you're not sure of the answer that you will have to choose. Then you run to section B and section C. Then you forget to come back because time runs faster. So ensure that you answer, or you provide answers for all given question statements, so that you won't leave spaces in there. Remember, every mark counts in this case. So it worth 16 marks. That is your 1.1. So we are given 8 options in there. You are given 8 question statements, and then each answer worth 2 marks. Then that gives you 16 marks. And then multiple choice examples. So remember, in this 1.1, you are given various options that are provided to you, and then you simply choose the correct answer between A up to D. You need to ensure that you number correctly. If ever it's 1.1.1, let it be 1.1.1, so that the answer can be correct if you choose. Avoid twisting numberings, because that can lead to you getting the answer that was supposed to be correct, but it will be wrong because we have taken it to the wrong question statement. So the following are the question statement that should be analyzed so that we can get the answer correctly. So these are just some examples. The basket full of goods and services for typically average South Africans. So this statement belongs to inflation. So what do we need to do now? In this case, we are given the statement, the basket full of goods and services. So we are here for typically average South Africans. So you need to go straight into inflation and check which basket is that. We have the PPI, we have the CPI. Now, remember, CPI measures the cost of living. So that talks to consumers, and those are goods and services. So in that case, let's see the available options. The consumer price index, the producer price index, import prices, export prices. Then which answer is correct? Then the answer is consumer price index. That's our CPI, because remember, it measures the cost of living. It is full of goods and services. The dearth of species for which we interact with is called, this is under environmental sustainability. So you need to check in this case also, if we talk about the dearth of species, that obviously talk to the loss of biodiversity. So in this case, let's check if that answer is provided in here. We have preservation, conservation, biodiversity loss, as well as loss of indigenous knowledge. Then we go there, biodiversity loss. Then we continue with the multiple choice. For an activity to be regarded as tourism, a visit should, so you know activities that will result to an activity being called a tourism. What should be there? What is the principle for that particular activity or visit to be known as tourism? We have different of them. So let's check what is given. Be less than 160 kilometers. That cannot be correct because it should be above 160 kilometers. Be more than a year? No. It should be less than 1 year if ever it's a part of tourism. Include income? No. Any visit as for tourism or to be regarded as a part of tourism should not include income, and then not include income. Therefore, in that case, we get an answer because the activity should not include the income. That is D as our answer. And then we continue. One-off adjusted inflation is, in this case, we are going straight to inflation again. So remember, we have two types of inflation, especially types of consumer inflation that have been adjusted. We talk about we talk about the core inflation, and then we talk about the CPI or headline inflation. So we need to check which one of them is here or none of them is here. Let's check. Hyperinflation cannot be correct. The core inflation is there. Let's see if we have something else. Stagflation as well as deflation. Then that simply means we have one which is correct in there, which is our B. Let's see the answer. The core inflation is indeed correct. Remember, core inflation is the one that excludes goods with highly volatile prices. If we talk of volatile price, we talk about price that can increase or decrease anytime. So they don't simply remain stable, but they can change anytime. For example, the price of red meat, we also talk about the fuel price of fuel levels. So also it's a part of the core inflation. And then we jump 1.2, we go straight to 1.3 because normally you score more marks in 1.2. So in 1.3, that's why we are given the definition. You must provide the correct concept. So it is very important that you know your terminology per topic and per chapter. You can be guided by Mind the Gap textbook in the or study guide. Use Mind the Gap definitions given at the beginning of each topic. Do weekly definition tests to improve your performance in section A. It is very important that you develop yourself or you improve your performance in section A by assessing yourself or check on the previous question papers. Keep on answering until you get to be used to this section. Do not use abbreviations and acronyms when providing concept. Remember, acronyms are not accepted in this section. You simply provide the answer in full words. Also, abbreviations are not allowed. Do not leave anything unattended. So in this section, that's why we get the most of blanks because candidates are used to leave spaces unattended in this section because they believe this is difficult, but this is relatively easy. You just have to know your content because it simply tests the content knowledge in this case. It worth 6 marks. So some examples. So you give one term for each of the following descriptions, right? Only a term next to the question number. No abbreviations or acronyms will be accepted. So if you write the abbreviation which then is correct, that will mean your answer is wrong because abbreviations are not accepted. Also, acronyms are not accepted. General increase in price is caused by increase in factor cost. So it is very important for you to know your content because if we talk of the factor cost, we talk about the cost for factors of production. So you need to know what links, it is linked to what kind of the inflation or what cause of the inflation, the factor cost. A measure of average change in price for domestic producers. In this case, also we talk about the producers. So we measure the average change in prices. So in this case, your answer should focus on producers. So you must look around PPI, not CPI, because in that case, CPI is for consumers, but PPI is for producers, since we say only domestic producers. Movement of people from their usual bases to unusual bases to observe the beauty of nature. It goes straight to tourism in this case. Remember, the key concept here is to observe the beauty of nature. This is a description that is very important. It tells you what kind of tourism is that. A local knowledge that is unique to certain culture or society. So in this case, if knowledge is local and is unique and so much embedded to the particular culture, obvious that is indigenously. So we'll check the answer. The disposal of toxic material into the environment, that takes time to decompose. We go straight to the environmental sustainability in this case. We check in the what kind of which answer is there, which answer is simply meant by this description in this case. Disposal of toxic material into the environment that takes time to decompose. Remember the kinds of waste we are having. We have chemical waste and hazardous waste, but these are not chemicals. That simply means this is a hazardous waste. The sustained unpredictable change in weather patterns. If ever the weather pattern it cannot be predicted, In this case, we go straight to the environmental sustainability again. We talk to climate change. But let's see then how are our responses. We have the first one, which is the cost push inflation. And the second one, 1.3.2, is producer price index. Then be very careful. PPI cannot be accepted. You will be marked wrong in this case. Ecotourism. We obviously know that ecotourism is all about touring to the place to observe the beauty of nature. Indigenous knowledge, IK will not be accepted because it's a part of abbreviation. So it's known as indigenous knowledge that is very linked to what? To the culture and is local. Hazardous waste. We know that the disposal of material into the environment that takes time to decompose, such as boxes. That's why we talk about recycling. Climate change also is there, where we talk about sustainable, unpredictable change in weather patterns. So it is very important that you master this section. It gives you confidence as you go on with your question paper. Then section B, we go to middle order questions, where you need to link and connect given concept. So let's see some examples. What impact does relaxed modal suasion has on inflation? So it's very important for you to know or to keep this in your mind. Relaxed modal suasion has on inflation. We are linking modal suasion that has been relaxed to inflation. Remember, modal suasion talks to the South African Reserve Bank giving some instructions to commercial banks to create the credit in a manner that is most desirable for prevailing economic conditions. So in this case, it has been relaxed, meaning the Reserve Bank has informed commercial banks to make it easy for people to get or to access credit, to ease the credit creation. So how will that affect the inflation? We all know that if ever there's more credit creation in the economy or in commercial financial system, people are always tempted to spend, and they spend the money they don't even have. So if people are having more money or are allowed to create more credit, that will lead to them demanding more goods and services. As they demand more goods and services, it can happen that our local firms are faced by supply constraints. They cannot afford to supply what is demanded. So the demand or aggregate demand will increase faster than aggregate supply, which will be leading to inflation. Let's look at the answer. Relaxed modal suasion, increased credit creation resulting to increasing demand, increasing faster than aggregate supply, which causes the demand pull inflation. So, like I've said, as people are demanding or as consumers are demanding more goods and services than what can be supplied, that will always lead to the pressure on the suppliers, and it will lead to prices increasing, which will be the demand pull inflation. Why is the conservation of the environment important in South Africa? Remember, if we talk of conservation, we go straight to environmental sustainability, whereby environment is protected and kept safe, and so that it can remain intact even for future generation. The main aim is to ensure that the future generation is able to get benefits we are currently getting from the environment. Remember that some of these natural resources in the environment are endangered. They are endangered. They can be completed. They are extinct. So if they can be completed, they will never be recovered again. So it is very important that they are well conserved so that they can last longer for the future generation to also get the benefit that we are getting on the environment. Let's look at the answer. Some species extinct. If they are being overconsumed, they can be completed and never be recovered again. It is necessary to keep the environment intact so that even the future generation can enjoy benefits derived from the environment. Like I've said, so we go on again with the next question in the middle order. Why should the South African Reserve Bank increase the repurchase rate if inflation increases beyond 7%? It is very important for you to keep the following. Our South African inflation target is between 3 to 6%. So that simply means inflation should not decrease below 3%, should not increase above 6%. Why? This becomes an issue. If ever inflation excessively increases beyond the target, that undermines the standard of living. Because as inflation increases, the buying power parity of money will be declining, leading to people affording less goods and services. As people afford less goods and services in the economy, that will undermine their standard of living, that will lead to poverty. And also, people that are earning stable income or low income will be mostly affected because they will find themselves not affording their basic needs and necessities. So it is very important for the central bank to intervene and to combat inflation if it's above 7%. So why it's important, I think others have been mentioned indirectly. Let's see. South African Reserve Bank target, South African inflation target is between 3 to 6%. If it increases beyond the target range, the buying power parity of money decreases and make low-income group vulnerable, and as it undermines their standard of living. So if we say they become vulnerable, we mean they will find themselves living under poverty because they won't be affording most of goods and services that are believed to be necessities. Increased repurchase rate is a restrictive measure as it makes credit expensive and causes less borrowings by commercial banks. Household and businesses, this decreases money supply and aggregate demand in the economy. So the question was based on the repurchase rate being increased. Remember the repurchase rate or repo rate. This is the interest rate that is charged or imposed by Reserve Bank to commercial banks on their borrowings. Whenever commercial banks are borrowing money from South African Reserve Bank, they pay the interest rate that we call repo rate or repurchase rate. So if ever it's been increased, it makes it difficult for commercial banks to take loans from South African Reserve Bank. If ever repurchase rate has been increased, the credit becomes expensive in the economy, making it difficult for commercial banks to take loans. Remember that as repo rate increases, commercial banks will also adjust up their interest rates. For that sake, interest rate will be increased, responding to the increase in repo rate, which will be resulting to less money supply in the economy since credit will be more expensive, and then will also result to less demand for goods and services. As the demand for goods and services decline in the economy, that will always lead to prices relatively slowing down or declining. And then we continue with another middle order question. How does the market cause environmental deterioration? If ever the market is involved, remember, in this case, we are straight on the environmental sustainability. How can it degrade environment, the market? Remember that the market will always see environment as a common resource to create profits. Whenever the market sees the environment, it simply wants to create profit. It simply wants to make use of it to produce goods and services. So, as the market produces more goods and services, remember, it burns the fossil fuels. As it burns fossil fuels, those machines that are being used, they relieve greenhouse emission or greenhouse gases that will always damage ecosystem. So, the market in this case causes environmental problems. It degrades the value of the environment because as the market keep on producing more goods and services, it should be burning more of fossil fuels, which will further degrade the environment. So let's look at the answer. The market see environment as a common resource. Industries use anti-friendly machines which burn fossil fuel into the environment and damage ecosystem. Remember, businesses, as they produce goods and services, they burn fossil fuels that cause air pollution. So as they cause air pollution, what happens? That will always damage the ecosystem and also the ozone layer. Also, as businesses are producing more goods and services, they create most of the waste that can be a part of chemicals and hazardous that will be wasted into the environment. And as it's being wasted into the environment, that will lead to environmental degradation or it will be losing its value. High profit margins by business result to carelessness use of natural resources as they are over extracted, which endanger both renewables and non-renewables. Remember, under natural resources we have both renewables and non-renewable resources, and they're very important even for future generations. They must always be there and remain intact. So if business keep on producing and over consuming these natural resources, they are in danger of being completed if they are not renewable. If they are renewable, they might be used faster than they should be, which will be taking time for them to be recovered because if they are over-consumed quickly in the short period of time, they should be given a chance to grow up again. So that might lead to the environment lacking those resources because they take time to be cultivated, especially if we talk about the forestry. So if we simply cut trees, now in cutting them in the particular field now, all of them, that will mean within the period of 20 years, we'll be waiting for them to grow up so that they can be ready for being used again for the production process. So it's very important not to overconsume them because they are very important for usage. They must be used in a manner that will sustain them, protect them. Regardless, if we say they're renewable, we should also use them wisely, because if we don't use them wisely, they will be completed for now and it will take time for them to be recovered, even though they are renewables. The overconsumption of natural resources by the market may result to species being extinct, or they will be lost forever and they will never be recovered. Remember, some resources are in danger of extinction. So if they can be overconsumed now, like non-renewable resources, they will never be recovered, and the future generation will never access the benefit we are getting as in now from those natural resources or from the environment. How do tourism activities negatively affect the environment? So we go straight to tourism as a topic in this case. We know that as tourism increases in the particular area, it can lead to a certain pollution, because tourists can leave their carbon footprint in the particular area. And also, as the particular environment is visited the most in the short period of time, that will be causing environmental stress, and that will degrade the value of that particular environment. Let's look at the answer. The rapid increase in tourism in one attraction may cause environmental stress and damages, since tourists leave their carbon footprint. So as tourists are in the particular area, they will be causing littering, they will be maybe cutting some plants indirectly, and then also some of the part of the environment or species will be destroyed. So that will be causing environmental degradation, and it will affect tourism or environment negatively because of tourism. What pricing effect does tourism have on local people? So if ever in your area there's a particular attraction, normally you come across more tourists visiting the area. For that sake, businesses of the area will always increase their prices, because they know that the area is good for tourism, and tourists are not having much of choices. They will always buy goods and services in the area at the higher price, because there is no alternative market available. For that sake, local people will also be affected, because they are also consumers in the area. They depend on these goods and services. So as they buy goods and services in this particular area, or this particular area around attraction, they will be paying higher prices for goods and services because of tourism. Let's look at the answer. Tourism can cause local prices to increase because tourists often pay more for goods and services, which is often beyond what local people can afford. And then we continue with the Mugler order in section B. Why does the government use property rights as a measure to ensure environmental sustainability? Remember, property rights give people a rightful ownership of their land or of their particular places. So we know that if ever the place or the area or the land belongs to you, you will always take care of it. You will never damage it. So according to conservationists, it is believed that people will always take care of what belongs to them. That's why the government provide or give them property rights. Let's look at answers. The government uses property rights because the conservationists believe that people always take care of what belongs to them, which prevents flora and fauna from extinction. So some plants and animals will be protected if ever there is a rightful ownership of that particular land. So people will always protect what belongs to them in the particular area. They will never destroy. That's why the government intervenes by providing property rights. How would consumers react to high inflation expectations? So in this case, we go straight to the inflation. You as a consumer, because you are also a consumer, if ever you expect that there will be an increase in inflation in the next 3 months, what would you do? So some consumers may choose to buy more goods and services now to avoid paying more for goods in the near future. And some consumers may decide to save their money so that they can use it when inflation has gone down, while the money will be still having more buying power, because as they spend during the high level of inflation or high rate of inflation, they will be spending their money to afford less goods and services, because as inflation increases, the buying power of money will be dropping or going down or declining. Consumers will always behave in a manner that protects the buying power of their money. They can buy more goods and services now while their income can still afford more goods and services. Or they can postpone the spending or consumption for future by saving their money so that they can use it in the future while it can afford more goods and services. And then we'll continue with the Mugler order. How does deflation affect businesses? Remember, deflation refers to the sustainable decrease in the general price level. So let's look at the business side now. If ever there's a deflation, that means inflation have decreased below 3%. How will that affect business? Remember, business operate to make profits. So if prices that are declining rapidly, business will find themselves being discouraged to invest in South Africa, being discouraged to produce goods and services locally because they are getting less returns. So it can lead to withdrawal or disinvestment in South Africa, and also business will be pessimistic about investing in our country because they gain less returns. Deflation is a significant decrease in the general price level, which results to severe declining profits for businesses. Why do financial institutions impose interest rates on loans? So you need to remember the following. Financial institutions or commercial banks, they function in this main objective. They sell money to make money. So if ever they give out loans, they need to safeguard the buying power of the money they give to, or of the credit they give to debtors. At the same time, they need to ensure that they make profits. So let's look at the answers in this case that are very much relevant to that. Financial institutions sell money to make money. Interest rates are imposed to earn returns on credit issued and also to protect the value of money because debtors get loans with more buying power and pay back with less buying power. So to protect the value of money, interest rate must be imposed so that the buying power part of money can also be protected, and also so that business can always be making, so that commercial banks and financial institutions can always make profit, because the main aim as they operate is to make profit by selling money. And then we continue. Why is the depreciation of the currency seen as one of reasons for cost push inflation? Remember, when the currency depreciates, it loses its value. So our local businesses normally buy or import machines from those foreign countries because we are not good in capital. So as our currency loses the value or depreciates, that simply means imports will be relatively expensive to South African economy. For that sake, a business will be buying machines and equipment at the higher cost, leading to them producing at the higher cost and selling at the higher cost, because machines are expensive caused by the weak currency or depreciation of the currency or South African rand. Businesses are more dependent on imported machinery and equipment. The currency depreciation increases prices for imported machinery, which increase the cost of production by businesses. Businesses offset high production costs to consumers, resulting to the cost push inflation. Remember, as businesses are producing at the higher cost because of expensive machines caused by the weak currency, because since these machines are imported, they will always offset the cost of production to whom? To the consumer as the end user of the product, for them to maintain their profits and also to keep up with their operations. How can vault money reduce inflation? Remember, if we talk about the vault money, we go straight to what? To cash reserve requirement or reserve requirement ratio as one of monetary policy instruments. So if we talk of vault money, we refer to the money that is available for the particular financial institution or commercial bank, but the money is not available to use. They have money, the money belongs to them, but the money cannot be used to give out loans or to create credit. We call that a vault money caused by the cash reserves or reserve requirement ratio. So if money is available in the commercial bank but not available for the circulation, that will always lead to less money supply available in the economy, resulting to less demand for goods and services. And that will reduce inflation, because consumers will be discouraged from demanding more goods and services due to the fact that credit will not be easily created in the economy. Remember, if we talk about the cash reserves, we refer to a ratio or that commercial banks, or the ratio on revenue that commercial banks are obliged or forced to keep in their custody to prevent what we call inflation and prevent having more liquid money. So if the money is kept in the central bank or in the commercial bank, not being available for credit creation, that money is not available because it cannot be counted as a part of the money supply, due to the fact that the money is not available to debtors or in the circulation. That will always lead to what? It will always lead to less demand for goods and services, because there's less money supply. And if there's less demand for goods and services, prices will slow down. Let's look at the answer. Vault money is the money in a form of cash reserve by commercial banks, which is not available in circulation. It hampers commercial banks from giving more credit, which decreases money supply and aggregate demand. And then we move to data response. In this case, we are giving information in a form of the extract, the cartoon, the picture, the graph, etc. You need to be able to interpret the given information. Remember, in this given information, it doesn't mean that you will be getting all answers from the given data response or given information. The minimum can be 2 marks that can be discovered in there. Also, it is not guaranteed that you will get that 2 marks in there. It can happen that they ask you lower order questions that answers are not in there, but they are simply easy for you to derive. So here we come across the data response on inflation. So we are given headline inflation, percentage change over 4 quarters. So in this case, we are given the percentage in here, and then we are given the inflation rate. There you can see inflation is above the target, it's above 6%, also above the target. That is our 2016. And then we go to 2017, has declined a little bit, and then also still down there between 2017 and 2018. In 2018, it increases slightly, but it's still within the target range. And then it goes down. In 2019, we can see it's down. Goes up in 2020, it's a little bit up. And then in 2021, it declines slightly as compared to 2020. We can see that. And then this info is taken from Stats SA and South African Reserve Bank for 2019. So remember, this is headline inflation. It is very important for you to know the content as we are giving the data response. If we talk of the headline inflation, we talk about the inflation that has not been adjusted. This is also known as the CPI inflation, has not been adjusted for interest rate or mortgage bond. So if you compare your headline inflation to what you call the CPIX inflation, remember CPIX has been adjusted because interest rate has been removed, and then headline has not been adjusted. You keep that content flowing in your mind, then you go to questions. And then what do the 2 dotted lines in the graph refer to? Let's look at the dotted line in there. Okay, we're looking for that data response to come back. Okay, the dotted lines here indicate the inflation target. This is the minimum target, and this is the maximum target. Remember, our inflation target in South Africa is between 3 to 6%, meaning inflation can increase to 4%, 5% to 6%, but cannot go above, cannot also go below 3% as much as it decreases. So the dotted lines indicate what? Indicate the inflation target of South Africa, which is between 3 to 6%. That is 1 mark, lower order. If you can check information there or the answer is not provided, but you must just know if it moves from 3% to 6%, that is our inflation target in South Africa. During which year would the Monetary Policy Committee more likely to increase the repurchase rate or repo rate? So in this case, we talk about the year in which inflation was too high. That is 2016 because inflation rate was above the target. Briefly describe the term headline inflation. So this is the inflation that has not been adjusted. It is having effect of interest rate. The inflation rate that represents the basket of, the cost of basket of goods and services of average South African's household, which is measured by the consumer price index, unadjusted inflation. So it has not been adjusted. Our CPI figures have not been adjusted for interest rate. It is having the effect of the interest rate. Then we continue the question. Explain the influence of inflated expectations on consumption expenditure. We've spoken about this. We mentioned that if ever consumers are expecting more inflation in the near future, what do? They can buy more goods and services now to avoid buying more in future where there will be high inflation as their money will be affording less goods and services. Or consumers can save their money for future to purchase goods when inflation will have dropped down. If ever they expect inflation to decrease, consumers will stop buying goods and services now and buy them in the near future where they can afford more goods and services, because as the inflation decreases, consumers will be affording more goods and services. Under inflationary conditions, consumers expect prices to rise further and start to buy more goods and services, e.g. petrol prices. Labor unions wish to protect their members' income against erosion of purchasing power caused by inflation. So they start bargaining and they start to negotiate for better or higher wages and salaries, because if they don't, as inflation starts, the wages and salaries will be declining and causing people to afford less goods and services, meaning the real wage will be going down or declining. And then we continue. How would an increase in value-added tax impact on the economy? So if VAT increases, what happens? Remember, the value-added tax affects most of consumption or the demand for goods and services, as it increases the selling price. So if it increases, the prices will be relatively high, or goods will appear relatively expensive. For that sake, there will be less demand for goods and services in the economy, resulting to producers making less profit. Let's see. An increase in VAT could ensure increased government revenues, which would allow government to provide more social services and benefit communities. We know that if ever VAT has increased, there will be more government revenue. So that's a good side, a good effect of increased value-added tax. Lead to decrease in government revenues due to consumers reducing their consumption. Since consumers will be affording less goods and services, there will be less demand for goods, and that will lead to government revenues declining. Influence production or supply negatively due to a decrease in the demand through higher prices. Remember, I've mentioned that this results to increase in selling prices, resulting to the supply, producers being discouraged, because if goods are expensive, consumers will afford less, and then for that sake, the supply will be undermined because consumers are not affording more goods and services. Impact the lower income group more adversely due to the aggressive nature of the taxation. As VAT increases, people that with the stable income and the lower income will find themselves more vulnerable, because they will be affording less of necessities as well as the basic needs, so they will be affected negatively. Impact negatively on the level of aggregate demand due to an increase in prices. That might lead to more unemployment. We know that selling prices will be increasing, and then the demand for goods will be declining, forcing businesses to retrench some workers because there will be less demand for goods and services. So that will be leading to high level of unemployment because of less production required in the market, and also the supply will be declining, caused by the fact that the demand is also lower. Stabilize the inflation rate due to lower demand. So that will lead to stability in terms of the inflation rate, because the demand will be lower. We continue with another data response in there. There we are giving the cartoon in there. We have inflation, the credit, savings, and wages. Inflation. There you go. Then we are given the source of the information in this case. So in your mind, you need to check the following. If there is more credit creation, there will be more demand for goods and services, and that will lead to what? The demand pull inflation. If ever there are more savings, that will lead to less inflation, because as savings are more, there will be a lower demand for goods and services. And then if ever there are more wages and salaries, that will be putting businesses under stress, because the cost of production will be increasing. Labor costs will be relatively high, resulting to businesses having to increase their selling price because they need to maintain their profits. If credit is too high, that will lead to more demand. Credit is too low, that will lead to less demand. Savings are too high, less demand. Savings are too low, more demand for goods. Wages are too high, that will lead to increase in cost of production by business as the labor costs increase. If they are too low, that will reduce the cost of production and result to business producing at the lower cost. So this will be causing the demand pull inflation, but this will be causing the cost push inflation. Let's continue and look at the questions. Identify the cause of cost push inflation in the cartoon above. On our analysis, we managed to identify wages. So we have wages. Name one way that is used to measure inflation. So we have 4 of them. Let's look at them. We have indexes that talks to CPI and PPI, consumer price index, as well as the producer price index. We have weighting, where we weight the average, where most of consumers spend their income, if they spend their income on basic needs and necessities, or they spend their income on luxury goods and services. Also, we measure it based on inflation rate, and then we also measure on the implicit GDP or GDP deflator. Briefly describe the term inflation. So inflation refers to the sustained or significant increase in general price level over a period of time. Explain the effect of decrease in the general price level on producers. So if ever the prices are significantly decreasing, what happened to producers? So producers will earn less revenue, resulting to lower profits. Producers may leave the market for other profitable business ventures. Low prices will result to businesses reducing their production levels and employ less workers. Producers may access some of their input at the lower cost, which will reduce the cost of production. So there are negative effects as well as the positive effect in this case, because positive effect will be when they produce at the lower cost. But negatively, it's when they get less revenues or less income or less profits on their operations. How can the government use fiscal policy to combat demand pull inflation? Remember, now in this case, we talk straight two measures to combat inflation, which is the part of our essay in this topic. So remember also, the fiscal policy consists of government spending as well as the taxation. We also have government debts, but we don't much consider them in this case. So the government spending should be reduced so that there will be less infrastructural development, less employment opportunities, less income, and less demand for goods and services. Taxation should be increased in a form of either direct or indirect tax. If taxation has been increased in a form of indirect tax, that will lead to goods becoming more expensive and also less demand for goods and services. Under direct tax, that will lead to household or workers having less disposable income. With the declining income, obviously, household will be demanding less goods and services, which will be reducing general prices. The government can combat inflation by increasing the level of taxation to decrease disposable income and curb excess demand for goods and services or spending. Implementing or increasing surcharges on imported goods to curb the buying of imported goods and services. So ensuring that more import restrictions are put in place so that consumers cannot demand most of imported goods. Cutting back on spending such as cancelling infrastructure development project, e.g. building of dams and public buildings. Borrowing less to finance expenses, thereby not contributing to an increase in money circulation. So government borrowings or government debts come in whereby the government will be borrowing less money so that it cannot finance its spending the most to reduce the money flow in the economy. And then we are giving information here on the Consumer Price Index or CPI 2015 as our base year, 2016, 2020, 2019, 2020, and 2021. So keep it in your mind. Our 2015 is the base year as for our current, South African Reserve Bank information. We take 2015 as the base year. So Consumer Price Index, we have 100 in 2015, 103.5 2019, 107 2020, 109.5 in 2021. That means now this is the upward trend. So CPI figures are increasing in this case. So let's look at questions and see. Identify the base year in the table above. So we talk about the 2015 as our base year. Name the institution that is responsible for controlling inflation in South Africa. This is our South African Reserve Bank or SARB. Briefly describe the term hyperinflation. So it is the type of inflation whereby prices rise so rapidly that people lose confidence in the value of money. Occurs when the inflation rate is so high that it can be described as out of control. It can go even above 50%. And then we continue with the question. Explain the importance of measuring inflation in the economy. Why should we measure inflation? To determine whether the inflation rate is still within the target range or not, so that the Reserve Bank can intervene by combating inflation. It helps policymakers to make informed decisions relating to monetary policy. Remember, if ever they are not informed about the current inflation rate, it will be difficult for monetary policy committee to make relevant decisions on the monetary policy. So if they know the current inflation rate, they will be making informed decisions. To measure the cost of living, which is used for collective bargaining. So to ensure that the government is fully informed about the cost of living so that there can be relevant intervention to support people, especially with a stable income that are mostly marginalized or vulnerable in the economy. Use the information in the table above to calculate the inflation rate from 2020 to 2021. 4 marks. So in that case, what do? We say the CPI for the current year, which was 2021, minus CPI for the previous year, which was 2020, divided by CPI for the previous year, multiplied by 100. That gave us a 2.3%, or which is 2%. In this case, keep it in your mind, inflation was below its target range, which is 3%, the minimum. So the government was supposed to intervene in here and cause the inflation because it is below the target range. Hazardous waste, toxic. So in this case, we are straight to the environmental sustainability. We look at the hazardous waste, whereby bottles are wasted into environment or into running water, also wasted into the sewage system, which will be a problem because it will take time to decompose. And then let's look at question. Name the type of pollution demonstrated in the above cartoon. Then we have water or sea pollution because it is wasted into running water. Give the intentional measure that deals with the control of hazardous waste. We talk about Basel Convention as for our international agreement in there. And then briefly describe the term conservation. Conservation is a sustainable use and management of the environment to ensure that it can be used by both present and future generations. So to keep environment intact, even for future generation, not to undermine its present value. Manage the environment to ensure its continuity. It must continue giving us benefits. Explain the effect of soil erosion to food security. If ever the soil has been moved away from the grass, that will always lead to what we call difficulties on growing up crops in that particular place. Land can no longer be cultivated. No longer be cultivated, thereby leading to shortage of food. So there will be a shortage of food because land cannot afford to grow up food or some crops in the environment due to the fact that there is no topsoil in there. The loss of topsoil result to high production cost and increase the price of food, thereby making food less affordable. Remember, if soil has been lost, the topsoil has been lost, farmers will always ensure that they bring soil into that particular area and try to plant again. That will make it more expensive for them to produce. So it will be increasing the cost of production. How does human activity negatively affect environmental sustainability? So as we do as human beings, how does that affect? Human activity causes environmental degradation, which cause the depletion of resources. Direct or indirect overpopulation increase damage in the environment. Actions taken by humans such as burning and destruction of forests damage the environment. Polluting the environment, depletion of ozone layer, which will lead to global warming. So these are actions by human beings or people in your area, and it leads to environment being degraded or losing its present value. We continue. Again, under environmental sustainability, hazardous waste. Then we see here, if we read on in the cartoon, you people are dirty and very irresponsible. Look at all destruction you have caused. You have killed the plant and animal life. You are only interested in profit. It talks to businesses. We know that business, like I've mentioned before, they see environment as a common resource to create profit. So they do whatever possible for them to keep that profits high, which also goes with destructing or destroying the environment. Then we see here we have a chemical waste, whereby chemicals are exposed into the environment or running water, resulting to the loss of species. And then also we have hazardous waste, whereby some bottles and some materials are wasted into running water or land that will take time to decompose. That will always undermine what we call or degrade the environment. We are just the same. There you see environmental problems. There is a source, Wikipedia. Let's look at questions after analyzing our data response or cartoon. Identify one environmental problem in the cartoon above. We have hazardous waste. We also have chemical waste. Identify the phrase from the cartoon that relate to the loss of biodiversity. So the phrase is there, it says you have killed the plant and animal life. That's a loss of biodiversity or biodiversity loss. Briefly describe the term pollution. pollution, introduction of waste or toxic substances into the environment. And then we continue. Explain a measure adopted by the international community to deal with the loss of biodiversity. So in this case, we talk about the size-band commercial international trade in endangered species of plant and animals. Why is hazardous waste and chemical waste regarded as harmful to the environment? They kill living organisms, therefore causing an imbalance in the ecosystem. They cause infertility in people, animals, and plants. And then we continue with another data, with the data response again. Start the extract below and answer questions that follow. Weak rand can benefit South Africa's tourism. So remember, if our rand is weak or has depreciated, what happens? Foreign tourists will find it cheap to tour into South Africa because they can afford more of our South African rand at the lower cost. That's why it benefits our South African tourism, especially those that are flowing in or inbound tourists. But then if we talk about outbound, us leaving the country, it will be difficult because our currency will be weak and we will be affording less of the foreign currency. So it benefits tourists that are inbound or that are flowing into the country. South Africa's currency has reached its lowest level since 2001. This is great news for international tourists who can take advantage of a very favorable exchange rate to visit South Africa. Now, more than ever, South Africa offers great value for money and has become one of the greatest holiday destinations for international travelers. South Africa offers the vacation options to suit every pocket and state. Travelers are truly spoiled for choice from hotel and safari lodge accommodation, restaurants offering local and international cuisine, access to the Big Five wildlife and spectacular breathtaking scenery. Source, there it's given. Then we go and look at questions. Identify one good or service on which tourists can spend money in South Africa in the above extract. Hotel and lodge accommodation, it is given in the restaurants also. Big Five viewing. What is the name of the currency used in South Africa? We use rand as a currency in South Africa. Briefly describe the concept of ecotourism. Like we have mentioned before, ecotourism occurs when tourists visit the place to observe the beauty of nature. And then we continue with the data response. How does the weaker rand affect the South African tourists? If our rand is weak, how does it affect our South African people? Outbound tourism will be more expensive, which will decrease the outflow of domestic tourists. So like I've mentioned before, as our currency is weak, this will always lead to our South African tourists being challenged from touring to foreign countries because our currency will be affording less of the foreign currency. Weak South African currency is detrimental to outbound tourism. This will therefore increase domestic tourism. So people will decide to tour within their own regions instead of touring out of the country because of the weak currency. How can an increase in tourism negatively affect the environment? So in this case, we talk about, again, a negative effect of tourism. The increase in tourists in one place increase environmental stress, like we have mentioned before. Tourism activities have negative effects on the environment if tourists leave their carbon footprint. If they pollute the area that they have toured in, that will lead to what we call environmental stress. As they visit the area in one place in large numbers, that also causes environmental stress and environmental damage. And then study this extract below and answer questions that follow. Fuel hike to sip into consumer inflation. So remember, if we talk about the fuel hike, if ever price of fuel are increasing rapidly, that will be resulting to the what we call the cost push inflation. So let's look at the extract. Fuel hikes will mostly certainly impact consumers' inflation. According to economists, higher fuel price can also affect inflation indirectly through a second round impact. If firms spend more on transporting their goods, they can upwardly adjust the final price of their goods and service to pass the additional price pressure to the consumer. So they would always offset the cost of transportation to the consumer. And then let's look at the questions. Identify the type of inflation associated with the increase in fuel prices. And then we have cost push inflation or supply inflation. Name one way in which inflation is measured. Then it's measured through the CPI or PPI, weighting, inflation rate, as well as the GDP deflator. Briefly describe the term core inflation. In this case, we talk about inflation that exclude a good with highly volatile prices. So we say core inflation exclude items from the CPI basket that have highly volatile prices and items with the price affected by the government intervention and policy. And then we continue with our data response. Why should the wage rate be determined at the same rate or higher rate than the average consumer price index or inflation? Workers must enjoy a better or same standard of living than enjoying the lower standard of living or affected by lower standard of living. Workers should be able to afford basic goods and services. They should have enough money to satisfy their basic wants. Cautions the effect of inflation, which could reduce disposable income and also reduce the buying power parity of money. The real wage increases to keep track with the cost of living. So wage must always increase so that the cost of living must always be afforded by the consumers. How can the government use fiscal policy to combat inflation? Increase in direct tax to decrease disposable income of consumers. Increase in indirect tax to reduce credit expenditure. Reduce in government expenditure such as postponement of or even cancelling infrastructure projects, like we've mentioned before. Reduce government debt used to finance government spending. Reduce government spending on wages and salaries for on an annual increase. And then we move to 8 marks questions, which is the middle order. That's why you differentiate or you briefly discuss. Differentiate between conservation and preservation. Conservation deal with the sustainable use of management of natural resources to ensure that they are available for even future generation. Conservation aims to create continuity of environment while ensuring that that changes is sympathetic to the quality of life. Human activities affect the environment not only because they cause pollution, but also because they tend to overutilize it. And then we continue. Preservation now. Preservation concerns elements of the environment that are threatened with extinction that can be completed. Preservation aims to protect and maintain these elements in their present value so they remain intact. The weaknesses in the market solutions require government to intervene to preserve environmental assets through buying or expropriating, subsidizing, and the control. Help to preserve biodiversity so that it cannot be lost. Briefly discuss the granting of property rights as a measure to sustain environment. Granting property rights has a conservation effect as people take care of what belongs to them. And then we bring the slide back. Give people property rights over plants and animals to prevent them from becoming extinct because they will be protecting them. Plants and animals may then be preserved at little cost to the taxpayer. If property rights are expanded to common goods like clean air, those suffering because of pollution could charge the polluters for the right to pollute. It is impractical to extend private property to air, but the principle of polluters paying victims to reduce pollution is sometimes followed by government. And then we continue with now it's a higher order question. Let's see now. That's why we evaluate the growth of tourism industry in South Africa. So it is very important when you do evaluation, you look at the good side and the bad side, what have caused the growth. That's an evaluation. Workers are experiencing an increase in disposable income because of tourism. Workers experience the reduction in working hours, more public holidays. There is a greater awareness of recreation time by South Africans. Well improved transport, roads, communication, and accommodation facilities because of tourism. There is an increase in advertising and promotion available to the public. South Africa has a lot to offer in the sphere of wildlife. Nature and is economical destination for foreigners. So because of the growth of the tourism industry, come across these experiences happening in South African economy. And then we move to the section C, where we talk about the section, the essay structure. So in this case, remember your introduction, which is 2 marks. So here we are given the way to go. The introduction is a lower order response. A good starting point would be define the main concept that's related to the question. And then do not include the part of the question. So do not copy the part of the question statement in there and make it your introduction. Just define the concept that is relevant to the, to the given content. And then avoid mentioning in the introduction what we are going to discuss. Don't say in this, I'm going to discuss this and then just define the concept or describe the concept. Then that will give you 2 marks if it's correct. Do not give examples in there. And then that's a body of your essay. So we have the main part, remember, as well as additional part. So in your main part, that's where you simply discuss the content. In there, the main part is divided into 2. We have the 8:18 principle, whereby we say 8 marks is for lower order, where you mention subheadings and then you mention examples. And then 18 marks is for you to discuss the content in depth. So a maximum of 8 marks may be allocated for headings. Like I've mentioned, additional part, critically discuss, evaluate, critically evaluate, debate, deduce, compare, distinguish, interpret, how question, evaluation questions suggest the solution. So in this case, that's where now you answer for 10 marks. You need to ensure that you provide 11 points. The points you provide should be in full sentences. Do not list, because if you list, you will be given the minimum of 2 marks. So the maximum of 2 marks. Also in this case, ensure that you explain critically. You don't just list. Ensure that your response is in the full sentence and order, because if you list, really, you will be forfeiting marks. And then conclusion, remember, in the conclusion, in this case, we don't deal with the lower order, middle order. So this is the middle higher order questions, higher order response. So you need to provide a summary of what we have discussed. Don't say in this, say I've discussed this and that, but you need to synthesize. You need to be critical by providing some solutions, by screening what you have discussed and see what can be the best solution over the matter above. So that's how you should respond in your essay conclusion. The maximum is 2 marks. Then that will always give you a maximum of 40 marks then all in all. A brief summary of what has been discussed without repeating facts already mentioned. Remember also that your conclusion can either be a part of the main part only or additional part, or include both main part and the additional part in your body of the essay. Any opinion or value judgment on the fact discussed, but avoid using I think. It doesn't work in this case. Additional support information to strengthen the discussion analysis. Contradictory viewpoint with motivation if required. Recommendations also. And then we have essay writing principles here. It is very important that you use subheadings. Do not use paragraphs. Write your subheadings, because each subheading worth 1 mark. If you don't provide subheadings, you simply provide paragraphs, you will be forfeiting 8 marks maximum. So it is very important that as you write your essay, you provide subheadings. Then the marker will be marking the subheading first before going into the content. But you will only get the mark only if the subheading was not provided for you in the question statement. If it's not provided, you get marks. If it's provided, continue by answering questions or answering your essay based on the point form. Use point form rather than paragraphs when writing an essay. Avoid writing paragraphs. Use point form so that your each and every answer can be standing alone. It will be easy for the marker to simply get the answer and mark you. But if you provide paragraphs, you might be repeating some facts in there, which can lead to you only getting 2 marks. They can claim the whole paragraph. It doesn't make it if it makes 1 sense, not expanding. It can be claimed to only 2 marks if it were 2 marks, but only to a mark if it were the mark, or even to 0 if it doesn't worth any mark. So it is very important that you discuss based on the subheading, and also ensure that you use points to explain, but your points should be in a form of full sentences. Remember the IMAC, whereby I stand for introduction, M stand for main part, A stand for additional part, and C stand for conclusion. Ensure that you follow this structure, because we have seen that some of you simply write introduction, you write the body, which is the main part, you go straight to the conclusion and forget additional part. Or some of you will be doing conclusion before additional part. So it is very important to follow the IMAX structure as you write your essay. Remember 8 to 18 principle, whereby 8 marks is for lower order, where you mention some subheadings and also where you give some examples. And also 18 marks is for content delivery, where you simply discuss in details. The content knowledge and the depth discussion of the concept has maximum of 18 marks. That will be giving you 26 marks. Then you go to the additional part. This is the example of an essay. In this case, we are just showing you how you should respond in an essay. Discussing detailed measures to combat inflation. 26 marks. How do inflated expectations affect the various role players in the economy? It is very important for you to note this, as we are given 10 minutes reading time. To plan a special on this, how are you going to answer this question? Which are the role players in the economy? We talk about the household or consumers. We talk about businesses. We talk about policymakers. We talk about also trade unions. So you must be able to screen them and discuss then how will they behave if ever they expect inflation in the near future. And then let's see our introduction. Okay, so we continue. These are principles. Be aware of listing on additional part has a maximum of 2 marks. If ever you list in there, you will only be getting 2 marks. Write your response in full words. Ensure that the responses you provide are enough to score maximum marks. Arrange your essay in a point form. As I repeat, your conclusion should not have any repetition of either introduction, main part, or additional part information. You need to provide something new but critical. Essay conclusion must be higher order response. And then there we go. Introduction. Inflation has been defined. Like I've said, you mainly define the concept in the inflation because these are measured to combat inflation. Inflation refers to the sustainable and significant increase in general price level over a period of time and simultaneous decline in the buying power parity of money. That's your introduction. And then monetary measures. Then you get a mark for writing monetary measures because these are measures to combat inflation. Monetary measures to combat inflation are taken by South African Reserve Bank or SRB and the government through the implementation of one or more than the following instruments. So these are instruments. We talk about the interest rate or repo rate. So we know that the Reserve Bank will always increase repo rate to combat inflation, and increasing repo rate will result to credit becoming more expensive in the economy, which will be detrimental to commercial banks as they will be finding it expensive to take loans from South African Reserve Bank. For that sake, money supply will be declining, resulting to less demand for goods and services. South African Reserve Bank caps inflation by increasing repo rate, which makes it expensive to borrow money. Banks pass on the increased cost of borrowings, repo rate, to their clients by increasing interest rate, if those interest rates are known to be flexible or nominal interest rate. High interest rate discourages consumers from taking unnecessary credit, discouraging consumer spending because there will be less money supply. A decrease in credit creation results to a reduction in money supply, thereby reducing the demand pull inflation. The increase in the interest rate stabilizes the value of the currency, which helps to reduce cost push inflation through lower import cost. And then open market transaction. Remember, in this case, we talk about the selling and the purchase of bonds. This activity takes place between strictly commercial banks as well as the central bank or the Reserve Bank. If ever there is high level of inflation, the central bank needs to sell bonds or shares or paper assets to whom? To commercial banks to collect money from the circulation. That will decrease money supply and decrease demand for goods and services. So South African Reserve Bank can directly decrease the supply of money by selling government securities in the open market. So they are sold to commercial banks directly. When banks buy these securities, money flow from the banks to the South African Reserve Bank, which reduces the money supply. So the money will be flowing straight to the Reserve Bank from commercial banks, and that will be decreasing money supply. And that is known to be quantitative tightening because the Reserve Bank try to tighten what we call the credit creation in the economy and taking money away from the circulation, but money is taken back to the custody. Reduction in money supply will reduce aggregate demand, controlling demand pull inflation. We know that if there's less money supply, there will be less demand for goods and services. Credit reserve requirement. So in this case, we talk about the ratio that commercial banks are forced to keep or reserve to avoid high rate of liquidity in the economy. So the Reserve Bank can intervene by increasing the cash reserve requirement so that there will be less money available within the financial system. If there's less money available, commercial banks will be giving relatively less credit in the economy, which will then result to less money supply and less demand for goods and services. Commercial banks are required to hold on certain minimum cash reserve with the central bank. An increase in the cash reserve requirement limits the amount of money that banks can give out as credit and helps to curb inflation. And then we talk about the moral suasion or moral persuasion or credit control. In this case, we talk about the manner in which Reserve Bank instruct commercial bank to behave based on the inflation rate and also based on the prevailing economic condition. If ever there's more inflation rate, the South African Reserve Bank or Central Bank will instruct commercial bank to be very strict when giving out credit, not to give out credit very much easily into the economy. That will lead to less spending. Remember, we are fully aware that if consumers are having more access to credit, they are always tempted to spend money they don't even have. So the Reserve Bank must act quickly to ensure that credit is not highly created so that it can be able to curb the demand for goods and services, thereby reducing the inflation. South African Reserve Bank can persuade commercial banks to act in a responsible manner when granting credit under inflationary conditions. Moral suasion helps to reduce inflation because credit will be granted to fewer consumers, thereby reducing the demand for goods and services. Fiscal measures. Inflation can be combated through fiscal changes in taxation and government spending. And then in this case, we talk about government spending. That's where the government can intervene by either cut its spending on infrastructure or postpone its spending on some projects so that there will be less job creation and less money flow in the economy. That will lead to less demand for goods and services. So in this case, the state can reduce expenditure on by postponing some government projects such as roads, hospitals, and schools. Aggregate demand will decrease, thereby reducing demand pull inflation. The government may finance the budget deficit from the non-banking sector to limit inflation. Taxation. So in this case, government can intervene by increasing taxation so that there will be less money available in the economy. For a direct tax, the government can increase direct tax so that there will be less disposable income, which will be hampering the demand for goods and services. For indirect tax, the government can intervene by increasing the likes of VAT so that the selling price for goods and services will be relatively high, discouraging consumers from demanding more goods and services. That will result to inflation slowing down. Government can increase in direct taxes or taxation such as personal income tax to decrease demand. An increase in indirect tax VAT causes spending to decrease because goods become more expensive. The state can impose surcharges on imported goods, which will increase their prices, discouraging consumers from spending on imports. A loan levy can be used to reduce disposable income of consumers. The government may reduce taxes on savings or introduce tax-free savings accounts to encourage savings. So the government can also encourage savings by reducing tax on savings account. Other measures we talk about in this case, increasing productivity. Remember, if ever there's a high level of productivity, that will always lead to more supply and less prices. Improved education and training allows for more people to be employed and ensure that they are more productive. So we talk about the human resource development in the statement. Price control. The government ensure that certain essential goods remain affordable by fixing their prices. In this case, we talk about the price ceiling and price floors. Wage policy. A wage policy should keep wage increase in line with inflation rate. Stricter conditions for consumer credit. National credit regulator may impose strict requirements on consumer credit, which will reduce aggregate demand. That take us to 26 marks, and then we look for 10 marks. In this case, we focus on role players. How can they behave if ever they will be in inflationary expectations? Inflation expectation play a major role in process that transmits expectations of price increase through the actual increase in prices. Consumer spending may increase when consumers expect prices to increase in the near future without making signals. More consumer goods and capital goods are bought before the price increase, thus increasing aggregate demand. Labor unions demand higher wages to protect purchasing power of their members when they anticipate the rise in inflation. When wages increase, businesses raise their prices to compensate the increase in labor costs, thereby fueling inflation. When businesses expect inflation to rise, they tend to increase their prices in advance, which increase their profit margins. The South African Reserve Bank uses inflation expectation to adjust monetary policy instrument that control money supply. So, if we can go back, consumers can then buy more goods and services now to protect the buying power of their money, or they can save their money now to ensure that they spend their money in future by postponing their consumption. They will be spending the money in future when the inflation will have been combated. And then producers can either produce more goods and services now to avoid producing when the cost of production will be relatively high. And then they can also increase their prices now for goods and services so that they compensate the future increase in labor cost. And then also trade union will start beginning and negotiate new wages and salaries for their members so that the increase in inflation cannot undermine the living standard for their members. And then the government can be able to intervene and make relevant policies, take some relevant measures such as the use of fiscal policy and monetary policy to ensure that the inflation does not increase beyond the target. Government can also use the supply side measures to support businesses to increase their supply to prevent high level of inflation. And then we go to the conclusion. A high rate of inflation will always cause instability in the economy. Hence, various measures are applied to combat it. Inflation expectations are self-fulfilling because high expectations lead to high inflation, and the vice versa is true. That is 2 marks. Then your essay worth 40 marks. Remember, this is your question 6. If you talk about paper 2 as you are revising paper 2, it's your question 6. Another example of an essay is under environmental sustainability. Discuss in detail problems and the intentional measures taken to ensure sustainable development, 26 marks. How successful the South African government has been to ensure environmental sustainability, 10 marks. Then let's go and see. We define environment or environmental sustainability in this case. Environmental sustainability can be defined as a development that meets the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. Environment can be defined as the amount of all living and non-living things for which we interact with. So we talk about surroundings here. The existence of the environment is under threat due to many problems which intensify as time moves along. So any of these can give you 2 marks. So we talk about loss of biodiversity or biodiversity loss. In this case, subheading is given, it's 1 mark. It relates to the number of genetic variety among individual plant and animals within the community of organisms. So in this case, if we talk about biodiversity, we refer to those species that we interact with. We talk about living and non-living things. We talk about flora and fauna. We talk about the life of animals and plants. So the depletion of natural resources can lead to extinction of some species and in so doing decrease biodiversity. Extinction of species is an irreversible process, therefore a major threat to the process of gene transplant among species. Loss of biodiversity continues. Some modern techniques make it possible to transplant desirable genes from one species to another to create the new species. However, the genes used must be diverse. A convention on international trade in endangered species bans commercial international trade in an agreed list of endangered species that is reviewed from time to time. In this case, we simply emphasize that the loss of biodiversity, these species, these plants will be affecting the environment itself, because as we lose them, some of them will never be recovered. So technically, transplants are currently used in some species so that they can be transferable from one species from one animal to another, or from one plant to another. Chemical waste. In this case, we talk about exposure of chemicals that are very much toxic and dangerous into the environment. So exposure to chemicals such as insecticides and pesticides can result in immediate death. So those animals and plants that are around those chemicals can be affected negatively. In other instances, it can result to death after a period of time due to digestive incapacity or nerve malfunctioning. In human beings, plants, and animals, exposure to toxicity may result in infertility. In normal concentration, most chemicals are not toxic, but in excess amount, they all can be dangerous, e.g., incorrect medicine dosages. So, if we talk of chemical waste, we talk about the wastage of chemicals into land uh, or the running water. We know that if chemicals have been wasted into land, then animals interact with that or play around, or plants will also be affected negatively. They can even die. People can also die. If ever chemicals are wasted into running water, animals that use that water, people that use water, also plants that are irrigated through that water will also die, cannot grow easily. So that's an effect of chemical waste. Other chemicals such as DDT are by design toxic substances. The production of chemical result to chemical waste and disposing of such chemicals is always a problem to the environment. The Stockholm Conference prohibit 12 of the deadliest man-made chemicals. The Rotterdam Convention protect. Okay, this is another one. Protect countries which do not have the necessary infrastructure to monitor the trade in hazardous chemicals. Climate change. Remember, climate change is a sustainable change in weather pattern that cannot be predicted. A build-up of greenhouse gases causes the heat from the sun to be trapped in the atmosphere. So, as businesses produce, they burn fossil fuels. By burning fossil fuels, that will be resulting to those those gases that are polluting the atmosphere and also damaging ecosystem as well as ozone layer. That can lead to the bad weather patterns and also what we call the global warming and affecting human lives, animals, and plants. The most common greenhouse gas produced into the atmosphere is carbon dioxide, which is released from burning of fossil fuels and wood. The amount of carbon dioxide produced is not being able to be absorbed by available trees because it is too much. Increasingly, natural forests are cut down for human use, therefore increasing greenhouse gases into the atmosphere. Remember, if ever trees are no longer there won't be anything to attract these greenhouse gases. Therefore, whatever gas will be going straight into the atmosphere and damage the ozone layer and also damage the ecosystem, causing the what we call the climate change. Increased greenhouse gases lead to the damage of ozone layer and eventually the global warming. Global warming influences the world weather patterns, which include extreme temperatures and change in rainfall patterns, which will affect human lives, animals, plants, and the entire environment if ever faced by global warming, because temperatures will be too high, there will be too much of the rain, etc. A voluntary deduction of the carbon dioxide levels failed led to signing of the Kyoto Protocol, which was signed in 1997 to ensure that climate change is well monitored by avoiding the burning of fossil fuels. Hazardous waste. In this case, we talk about the waste of the very much dangerous waste into the environment that will take time to decompose. We say it's radioactive. These types of waste are dangerous to living organisms and the ecosystem as a whole, and because they are very slow to decompose in the environment. The Basel Convention allows parties to export hazardous waste that has not banned its import. So, like some of countries in Africa are receiving hazardous waste from other countries, and they're getting paid for receiving that waste by some of Western countries. So that's what is mentioned in here under Basel Convention. So if we talk about hazardous waste, this kind of waste is very much dangerous, cannot decompose easily, affecting the environment, leading to plants not growing up easily because of that environment. That's why there've been this thing of recycling. Recycling now is taking place to ensure that the boxes, cardboards, and plastics are recycled due to the fact that they take time to decompose as they are wasted into the environment. Indigenous knowledge. In this case, we refer to that knowledge that is very important, which is very much grounded on our cultures. So the organic methods and natural process used by traditional indigenous people are not well known amongst the local communities of foreign tourist government. Programs undertaken to protect these systems will increase legitimacy and credibility in the eyes of both local people and outside world. There is an urgent need to respect and promote inherent rights of indigenous people that they derive from the social structures. So in this case, we refer to the knowledge that have been explained before to say is very much embedded on culture and local people. This knowledge is very important because if it can be lost, it will never be recovered. This is the knowledge that was used by indigenous people to survive. And this knowledge was not toxic as for the manner in which they were using it. For instance, hunting was the part of the way in which indigenous people were living, but they were not overhunting. But now, hunting is there and it is exploitative because these animals are being overhunted, which lead to their extinction. That's why now we have this conservation and preservation. Indigenous knowledge provide a powerful basis from which to develop alternative ways of managing resources. Care should be taken that indigenous knowledge is not overwhelmed and lost forever. So it must always remain available and intact so that it can continue by benefiting those that are still upcoming, which is the future generation. Additional part. So the government has been successful because it has formed public-private partnership with the local business that safeguard environment and natural resources through conservation and preservation. If we talk about game reserves and nature reserves, government is also involved in them by working those private companies or private sector to safeguard nature. Environmental taxes are imposed on businesses that cause environmental harm through any kind of pollution. In this case, we talk about businesses that are causing any harm in the environment, that are burning fossil fuels. They pay the carbon tax or carbon tax, or a green tax or environmental tax, so that they will cause less of what you call environmental gases. And then environmental taxes are imposed. Okay, I'm done with this. In the reduction of environmental effect, the government has improved the security on the exploitation of extinct species such as rhinos. We have seen the rhino poaching campaign ensuring that rhinos are well protected, because if they can be overconsumed and be killed, they will be lost forever. They are very important in South Africa because they even attract tourists to flow into the country. Environmental subsidies are given to organizations that prevent the use of protective measures over environment, such as recycling of used materials. So the government provides subsidies, environmental subsidies, to those organizations that are promoting recycling and those that are safeguarding the environment from harm. So they receive the reward in a form of subsidy. Local governments in big cities are consistent in garbage collection on a weekly basis. We all know that in a weekly basis, there will be collection of dustbins, which is a part of garbage, and then it is wasted in a particular area that have been designed. And there, they will be categorizing. Plastic will be on the side, cardboard on the side, and then boxes will be put on the side so that they can be reused to avoid the further wastage into the environment. Marketable permits are sold to businesses to cause pollution to a certain degree or certain extent, and these permits are equivalent to the amount of taxable pollution caused by businesses. And then government has not been successful because of the following. Greenhouse gases continue to increase with the increase in industrialization because of continuously burning of fossil fuels. We know that as businesses keep on producing, they are not using eco-friendly machines or environmental friendly machines. The machines they are using are burning fossil fuels. So if they want to produce more goods and services, they will always burn fossil fuels, which will be affecting the environment. So that's why we say the government has not been successful in this case, because as much as environmental taxes are there, market permits are there, but the damage in environment continues because machines used by businesses are not eco-friendly. The disposal of hazardous waste continues to be a problem in unoccupied land. We know we have seen our areas whereby it is written no dumping, but people are dumping in those areas, dumping their what we call chemical waste as well as hazardous waste, which is dangerous to children that are playing around, dangerous to the environment, and dangerous to animals that interact with that waste in that particular area. So the government has not been successful in this case. And then the conclusion: the success of the effort made by made in addressing environmental problems is dependent in whether the government, businesses, and consumers around the world take such measures seriously enough to implement them. There can be measures in place, but if they are not implemented, there will always be the damage of the environment. There will always be environmental insustainability. So it is very important that we also play a part in these situations by following these rules and regulations. We recycle, we avoid wasting the toxic material into the land surface, because that will lead to environmental degradation. Your essay work, 40 marks. Then, after all, I thank you, and I believe this lesson and this revision part will assist you as you prepare for your preparatory examination for 2023. Ensure that you interact with the content, ensure that you study thoroughly, ensure that you do self-assessment. Also, make use of previous question papers, especially preparatory exam question papers, so that you can knock it down. It might appear relatively difficult, but it's easy if you revise basically using preparatory examination question papers as the pass for Gauteng province. The next lesson will be giving us more details also on the essay that we can expect in paper 2 and paper 1. Also, the training will be given to you on how to attempt each section of the question paper. I thank you. You take care.